Hello again, YouTube. It's Peter with you. And I guess I got to talk about the thing. The whole debate 2 Thursdays ago thing, don't I? Now, as longtime viewers of my channel would know, I'm typically not the sort of person who engages in the topic of the moment type of thing. That's a hamster wheel that a lot of content creators get on, and you'll never run out of things to talk about. But will it be always of the most clear-mindedness and integrity? Sometimes, not always. You're supposed to have a definite opinion 5 seconds after it happened, and you're supposed to stick with that. Once you made up your mind, you start confirming your priors. And I'm seeing some of that go on in this entire discussion. What's absolutely clear is that Joe Biden had a terrible performance, while Donald Trump lied his ass off. Now, this concerns me more in a sense of like, okay, so if I moved to Montreal, I wouldn't necessarily have to learn French because lots of people speak English in Quebec and in Montreal and specifically, but I understand that their immigration rules might require that I at least take French classes, and would it just be rude to try and get by only in English? I'm not really sure. You have those kind of moments. I love Montreal, and my grandfather was born in Montreal, so that's a thing, but I'm starting to think, like, am I going to have to learn French now? But if you're waiting for me to say what I thought one way or the other, I'm actually quite ambivalent. Do I think this is proof of his cognitive decline, or was it a blip? Hard to say. I know that we all want to say that we know for sure, but you don't. Unless, of course, you work with Joe Biden on a daily basis. Then, by all means, tell us what you honestly think. If you've seen that. Should he drop out? Should he not? That, again, I'm highly ambivalent on. I, to be brutally honest, lean towards it, if only for the fact that I can imagine a path by which it would make it more likely to win. Particularly seeing that Kamala Harris, as much as people don't like her, polls reasonably well. Even at the current standing, she's a couple of points behind Trump, and I think that can be closed. Because, again, the vibe I get from this election is that it's really going to swing on things like voter apathy. And you have a baked-in support for either side, but either side seems to have a ceiling. And it's just going to come down to groups of people in the middle who are going to, lean one way or the other and go, maybe. It's really that tiny fickle portion of the American public, which way are they going to blow in the wind? But a lot of those people, as we've seen in things like the Republican primary voters voting for Nikki Haley, the countless people who are saying they wish they had any other choice, I feel like if they were actually given another choice, maybe they would have to put up or shut up and then decide, okay, actually we're going back to Trump, or yay, we finally have an alternative option, any alternative option, and that would swing it one way or the other. I think there's an argument to be made that somebody other than Joe Biden at this point would have a better chance. But beyond that, I really don't know what else to say on the subject. What I can say about Trump, aside from the fact that he lied, is that I feel like not enough of these media pundit types talk about the fact that let's really explore for a moment what it can mean if Joe Biden is in cognitive decline, because it's not unprecedented in American history. We had Ronald Reagan, who was suffering dementia in the White House. We had President Wilson, who had suffered a stroke, and basically the First Lady was acting as president. But more than that, we also had Donald Trump as president. Now, I want to make something absolutely clear from the beginning. In the last 8 years, 7.5 years, however long it's been, I've gained a hell of a lot more reasons to dislike Donald Trump. That's for certain. January 6th, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, on and on and on. I've gained more reasons to dislike Trump. But from the very beginning, I thought the man was a dangerously incompetent bullshit artist. That he essentially was the sort of blowhard who always talked like he had the solution to everything. He watched more Fox News than the Republican voting base he was appealing to, so he knew exactly what to tell them. He knew the exact narratives they responded to because, again, he's drawing from the same narratives that right-wing media serves up the narrative, and then he's saying, look, I got the solution to this narrative. But when you actually get down to brass tacks, he barely knows what he's talking about. His business career was by and large a sham. I mean, the guy couldn't even run a casino successfully. He played a powerful, in-control businessman on TV, but even his boardroom in that television show was a set. It was a fake. It was all this performance for reality television. And if you base your understanding of Donald Trump's business acumen on a reality television show, you are a special kind of gullible. And quite frankly, stupid. What Donald Trump was good at as a businessman was shameless self-promotion. And what he was good at as a politician was riffing off the narratives created by right-wing media and saying that he will somehow magically solve all the problems. Now, once he got into office, a lot started to come out from people who worked with him in his administration, the ones who were in the room with him, as they say. And according to highly credible reports from the staff of the White House, he would spend much of the day watching cable television, that he had to have televisions put everywhere, and his primary concern was how his presidency was playing out on cable news. That when it came to the national security briefing, they had to give him the highlights for children version of it because he was too lazy and or out of its depth to read a more in-depth briefing or sit through a more in-depth briefing. That he would basically president by tweet and leave his staff running around in chaos trying to fulfill whatever edict or idea popped into his head at 4 o'clock in the morning. He apparently had to have Pearl Harbor explained to him, what happened, why they were at this memorial. That's aside from calling veterans who died in wars losers and suckers. And then he mostly sat there at his desk, pressing his special Diet Coke button, basking in the trappings of the presidency to feed his ego. But again, let me put it this way to you watching this video. You're probably something, whoever you are, there are things in your life that you know about, subjects that if somebody were to come along and start BSing you about them, you know immediately. I know almost nothing about football. Never been interested in the sport. Never been interested in sports in general, other than hockey a little bit. But again, if I were to come along to you, start talking about football, you would know pretty damn quickly that I am full of crap. I have no idea what I'm talking about. Oh yeah, the running quarterback sure did touchdown real good. You'd roll your eyes at me, okay? That's how I feel anytime Donald Trump tries to talk about anything of substance. Why does he appeal to so many people? Lots of reasons. But you know what? There's lots of suckers in the world. There's a strong overlap between the sort of people who blindly follow Donald Trump and who believe in televangelist frauds and megachurch pastors with private airplanes, prosperity gospel nonsense. The sort of people who get into MLMs and believe that any day now Publishers Clearinghouse is going to send them that big check. And more than that, as I've said in previous videos, he's an asshole. And they can vicariously be assholes through him. They enjoy watching the consternation of other people. They drink liberal tears, as they say. They don't want to actually fix their problems. Yes, there are genuine problems, especially in the sort of rural America that overwhelmingly goes for Trump. They don't want tangible solutions to those problems. They want to make everyone else suffer and enjoy watching that suffering. But to circle back to what I was saying, if you're having trouble imagining what a presidency would be like, where the president is not capable of doing the job, and their staff and maybe vice president have to pick up all the slack, you don't have to look that far or that hard. Simply look at the presidency of Donald Trump. This is a person who at first said he was going to hire only the best people, only to turn on countless members of his administration that actually told the truth about who he was, what he actually did with his time in office, who he was as a person. He put his son-in-law, who, again, had nothing to show for his life other than poor business deals brought about through nepotism. He gave Jared Kushner a portfolio, dozens of portfolios. Like, Jared, solve this problem. Jared, go fix the Middle East. Jared, do this. He just handed off all the serious work to everyone else, while he ranted and raved on Twitter, pressed his little Diet Coke button, got angry at cable television, and obsessed over how his presidency was playing out on television. Even when he was focused on the job, he was the prime example of the Dunning-Kruger effect. Talked like he knew exactly what he's talking about. He had all the best ideas. He had the solutions to everything, but had no idea. There would always be this tell where he'd say, we're looking into it very hard. It means they have no idea what they're going to do about it. Or like after the incident with healthcare, he said, who knew healthcare could be so complicated? Everyone, Donald. Everyone knew healthcare was complicated. He thought that he would come in, he would fix the problem, because again, he has a massive self-confidence, a massive ego, but he's too lazy to actually do anything. He just wants other people to do everything for him and for him to take the credit. Well, he presses the little Diet Coke button on his desk. So he didn't need to be demented, although there's plenty of evidence to show Trump's mental decline. We don't have to point to that. He was never competent to begin with. I thought that from the beginning, and throughout his administration, he demonstrated that repeatedly. If you don't believe me and you think I'm just some sort of liberal blowhard, then feel free to review the statements of the people who worked with Trump in the Trump White House. People like Rex Tillerson, James Mattis. There was, of course, an entire book published anonymously that later the author of that came forward. All of these people spoke out about the incompetence, the chaos, the pettiness, the ignorance of Donald Trump, the laziness. This was not a man who got anything done. This was a man who had things done for him by a staff that most of the time had to run around like their heads were on fire, dealing with whatever tweet he came out with at 4 o'clock in the morning. But if you thought that was bad, then another Trump term would be worse, because all the competent, level-headed people who tried to be the adults in the room last time ended up leaving, and Trump learned his lesson not to let actually competent people in the room with him. This time, he will hire bootlickers who will implement things like Project 2025. And I think that if Donald Trump ends up winning this election, it'd be because of two things. Not because of his cult-like followers, but because of the apathy and normalization of the middle-of-the-road America. You'll be surprised, amazed even, how easily certain people can simply normalize Donald Trump. To look over his incompetence, to look over all the deranged things he says, to look over his own evidence of cognitive decline, and say, oh yeah, his economy was better, except when it wasn't, except that by most standard metrics like unemployment, the stock market, it also wasn't. Jobs growth wasn't that. No, it wasn't by objective metrics, but there was global inflation that genuinely hurt the pocketbooks of everyday people, and that's more salient to them than these abstract metrics that are typically trotted out as the markers of a good or bad economy under normal circumstances. So they get to peg Joe Biden with that, and their memories cheat them, and they think, oh, the economy was so much better under Trump in their imaginings. That sort of normalization, oh, it's Tweedledee, Tweedledum, it doesn't matter one way or the other, he's not being serious. I could make a whole video on my complete inability to comprehend how some people, essentially, they hear what they want to hear in Donald Trump. He says he throws all sorts of things at the wall, much of it based on the problem-solution paradigm created by right-wing media. But he also says all sorts of crazy things about, sharks and electric boats, and on and on. And when he says terrible things, they just, that's just Trump being Trump. They ignore it. They don't take it seriously. So what part of it, can you give me a guide of what part I'm supposed to take seriously but not literally, and which parts I'm supposed to take literally but not seriously? Like they can just dismiss the parts that they don't, like, they just pretend he doesn't even say half of what he says? What exactly? My main thing, if you're watching this, I'm like, actually, I like Trump. I want you to try and answer this question for me. Why am I supposed to actually like the guy? Now, I know what you're probably going to say. My inclination is to believe that what you're going to engage in is whataboutism, You're going to regurgitate aspects of the Fox News right-wing media narrative that the border is so out of control that only Donald Trump can save us from the border, that the economy is so terrible that only Donald Trump can save us. Okay, if you've drank the right-wing media Kool-Aid, can you do me a favor and rip your head from Fox News' ass or OEN or whatever harder drug you're mainlining now, right-wing podcasters, the War Room? Because they've created a narrative in which everything is terrible, and then they offer up the solution as Donald Trump. And maybe we can have a conversation about the reality of those things, and maybe we can't. But why am I, if I don't believe that narrative, why am I supposed to like this guy? Again, I think a lot of Trump supporters wouldn't even care. They're like, oh, we like drinking your tears. Oh, we're not assholes. We just enjoy watching the misery of others and making others suffer. Because that seems to be a lot of the appeal of it. He's a tough guy who's going to make people suffer. All the people that you bullied in high school, and now the liberal social SJW warrior people are telling you that you can't be a bully to them anymore. Well, you're going to teach them, aren't you? That's honestly my take on the mentality of a lot of the Trump cult. But again, I think those people are less of a problem than the apathetic people and the normalizers to say that it doesn't matter. So what if he gets back into power, uses his newfound powers of the presidency to prosecute all the people that are on his revenge list? So what if they start implementing Project 2025? It will all somehow work out in the end. It'll be no big deal. Tweedledee and Tweedledum. The Republican Party and the Democratic Party are basically all the same. I've been hearing that since I was a teenager. And I remember people saying about Ralph Nader, oh, George Bush and Al Gore, they're the same. What does it matter? And then, of course, we got Bush, and we got the Iraq War and his entire war on terror response to the Iraq War. And I'm sorry, I refuse to believe that Al Gore would have responded in the exact same way that George W. Bush did. I refuse to believe that Al Gore would have decided, you know what we should do? We should invade Iraq. I don't believe that for a second. I don't believe for a second that Hillary Clinton would have nominated 3 right-wing, far-right conservative justices to the Supreme Court. And now we're getting the Supreme Court decisions that they're coming out with, giving the president broad immunity for official acts. And of course, they get to decide what official acts are. Overturning Roe versus Wade, overturning the Chevron doctrine. The reality is that the worst-case scenario of a second Biden term is far better than the best-case scenario of a second Trump term. Trump will sit around in the Oval Office, of course, when he's not out golfing at his own golf clubs and charging the American people for the privilege. Sit around in the Oval Office telling the Justice Department to arrest the people who annoy him, which they'll now carry out because the Supreme Court gave him that power. He'll be sitting there tapping on his Diet Coke button, ranting and raving, while the ghouls who want to implement things like Project 2025 will be running the show. If they have a Republican Congress, then there will be a national abortion ban, along with all manner of other draconian laws. They'll try and implement Christian nationalist ideas. They will do everything within their power to make this a radically different country. The Heritage Foundation, one of the so-called think tanks behind many things like Supreme Court justices and Project 2025, put out a tweet saying that the Second American Revolution will be bloodless if the left allows it. In other words, don't worry, we're going to completely change this country, and if you get in our way, there will be violence. That's what they're saying. And we have every reason to take them seriously. It's not an unwinnable fight, though. The biggest enemies are apathy and normalization. If you know somebody in your life, a family member or a friend, who tends to normalize Donald Trump, instead of repeatedly trying to bash on him, although, depending on who they are, some of that might work, talk to them about Project 2025. If you don't know what it is, research it. Say, hey, how do you feel about this being the future of America? What do you think about this idea that they want to implement? And go from there. Oh, you think these are terrible ideas? Well, this is what a vote for Trump means. This is what Republicans winning means. Anyway, I know all of that sounds very dark, and it is, but I'm going to leave it here for now. There's plenty more to be said, but there's still time to say it. And I suppose I should start practicing now. Au revoir.